Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Gordon filling in for Angela Davis, and you're listening to NPR News and maybe even watching. For this special, we're streaming live on YouTube. So if you want to virtually join those of us in studio, you can do that at nprnews.org. No matter the form, thanks for joining us for this special show to talk about what Minnesotans have been living through this week. It was just 10 days ago that fires, likely started by lightning, started burning in and around the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota. Extreme heat and high winds last weekend, coupled with very dry conditions on the ground, allowed those fires to explode and grow exponentially. Because of that, early Monday, the U.S. Forest Service closed access to the Boundary Waters and started the painstaking task of trying to evacuate campers already inside the park. Today, there are more than a dozen fires burning in and around the wilderness area, and even more across the border in Ontario. At least 55,000 acres have burned. Smoke produced by those fires blanketed this state the last few days and has triggered some of the poorest air quality ever measured. It's all just really, really bad. Smoke is lifting out of the metro today, and temps have come down in northern Minnesota. But many officials have warned that this is likely just the opening salvo in what could be a months-long fire season. This is really unprecedented weather. So I have with me in the studio a couple of meteorologists, and the whole team is with us. Sven is on at home. This is a rare honor, though, I just want to say. So let me do a quick round of introductions. We have Chief Meteorologist Ben Cathy. Good morning, Ben.
Morning, Kelly. Good to be with you.
We have Mendy Thauhuber, one of our meteorologists, also here in studio with me.
Good morning, Kelly.
We have Sven Sundgaard, who you've been hearing all morning. Sven.
Hello, yes, I'm in the Northeast Minneapolis Bureau.
Yes, exactly. Enjoying your coffee. And completing our quartet of meteorological might is Jeff Masters. You know, these days, Jeff writes about extreme weather and climate change for Yale Climate Connections, which is a news organization that reports on our changing planet. But he's also a former hurricane hunter and the co-founder of a little commercial weather service you might have heard of, Weather Underground. He joins us this morning from Highland, Michigan. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning. I'm also an air pollution meteorologist, have my PhD in that.
In your spare time. Amazing. So before we launch into our conversation, I want to make sure that listeners know that this is your chance to ask questions. If you've been listening to NPR News all week, you've heard a lot of facts. Maybe you want to know more, though. You have a question about forecasting smoke, or maybe you want to talk to this group about how climate change is impacting these fires. Maybe you want to talk about how to keep you and your loved ones safe. This is your chance. The phone lines are open. You can call us at 651-227-6000 or 1-800-242-2828. Okay, so let's start by talking about the smoke. I'm going to start with you, Sven, because we last touched base on Wednesday morning, a few hours before the smoke settled down into the metro area. We knew it was coming. We knew it would be bad. But I have to ask, were you surprised when you walked outside Wednesday afternoon?
You know, unfortunately, I have to say I'm not. If you had asked me 5 or 10 years ago, I would have been surprised. But I think, like all of us, we've kind of unfortunately gotten used to it. I think the thing that's surprising this summer is that we waited until this long to get some of that wildfire smoke. You know, some of the recent summers, it's been happening as early as May, I believe last year or the year before. So it was a late start to the season, but yeah, sadly not surprising. But the extent of it was a bit surprising, especially some of those values we've been seeing in northeastern Minnesota, just off the charts smoke. And think of how bad it was in the Twin Cities. It was quadruple that in Ely, and up on the range still is here this morning.
Right. It's hard to imagine. So, Ben, let's talk about the latest on the smoke. It is getting better in the metro, but what is it like still up north?
Yeah, we're going to see some really hazardous values. That's the technical term
And that's the highest that the chart has.
And yeah, in fact, the chart only goes up to 500, and then it just says we don't really know what to do. So yesterday in Virginia, Minnesota, for example, it was 1,400 plus, almost triple that. So we've broken state record after state record. Things are shifting largely into Lake Superior in Wisconsin and over to Houghton, but we definitely need to watch it because, as you said, this is going to be a months-long battle, Kelly, that's going to go nowhere fast. And so you got to be prepared throughout the season for a resurgence of smoke.
Yeah. And Jeff, you're in Michigan, so I know you're seeing it there too. What is it like as the smoke has traveled further east into your area?
Second straight dystopian sunrise this morning, that kind of a hazy orange glow. I've been shut up inside my house here with 5 HEPA units running, and I don't go outside without a mask on.
Wow. And it has that, so, like I said, here in the metro, in the Twin Cities area, we are seeing skies clear, but in Michigan, you are not. You're still in the thick plume.
Yeah, we're hazardous right now. AQI is about a 350 reading, but we are expecting that cold front to come through tonight, clear us out. Looking forward to 18 hours of good weather tomorrow.
Okay, and that's kind of as much as we can hope for right now, I feel like, with the smoke swirling. So, Mandy, I'm going to give you like the how question. Give us the science behind how smoke is able to travel. Like here are the fires in northern Minnesota and in Canada. But even before the metro had smoke, maybe even before Duluth had smoke, Boston and Michigan and New York and Toronto, and they had smoke. So tell us a little bit about the science of what we know, how smoke gets around.
Yeah, Kelly. Well, wildfire smoke, it can travel incredible distances because they're just tiny little smoke particles, and they're so small that they stay suspended in the air for days. And the intense heat that these large fires produce, it lofts that smoke thousands of feet into the atmosphere. And, once it's high enough, strong winds, including our jet stream, we kind of like to think of it as like a highway. It kind of carries it hundreds or even thousands of miles. I know last year it was very impressive that smoke from last year's wildfires reached all the way down to Florida. That was the first time that they had ever seen that. So that's why we end up with those hazy skies and poor air quality, even when the nearest wildfire is pretty far away.
And it does depend on which level of the atmosphere it can go to. Like I know that when the fire started to really explode, the smoke plume went really high and then it gets caught up in those winds. Is that right?
Yes, and we've been posting a lot of satellite pictures on Updraft. I know Sven has. You can clearly see the smoke on satellite, and you can see it following that jet stream. That's why it's able to reach these places. It's quite incredible.
It is. It's very dramatic when I've seen some of those same images to see this big plume of smoke mixed in with clouds, but you can see that it's this big, dirty, gray smear across the northern U.S., and then to see how it travels, and it goes from high up in the atmosphere sometimes, then down low to the ground, which is what we have been experiencing here in Minnesota. We do actually have a question, because I think this is to the point of what we're talking about. So, Barbara, are you there?
Hello.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for listening. You're in Vadnais Heights. What's your question?
Yeah, of course, I'm concerned about the air quality impacts on your health, but I have a question about is there an app that shows a regional view of the plume? We're going to be traveling from Minneapolis to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I'm wondering if there's something that we can track the plume with.
Ben?
Well, good morning, Barbara. I'm a really big fan of a couple of different things that I'm going to talk to you about. So one is the EPA's Air Now, and that's what we use as meteorologists, and I think everybody should
great.
have this too, even if you're not into weather per se. So you can turn on the sensors for PM 2.5, which, as Mandy mentioned, is the particulate matter 2.5, and that will tell you what it is in each place. So right now in Virginia, Minnesota, it's like 928, but Minneapolis is down to like a 52, so cut into about a sixth of what it was. It also has this color coding of the hazardous and unhealthy, and the orange and the yellow and the red, and so that's great to have. Also want to put in a plug for a free app. I have nothing to gain here from mentioning, but it's called Watch Duty. It will tell you details for these big fires along with the fire outline. I've set up these text alerts to give me things about the Sioux Fire, the Bear Creek Fire, the Camp Fire, and it will also post to you about potential evacuations in real time.
Yeah. And I will even say, as somebody who uses the airnow.gov, so you can do it on the web, or you can download it as an app. You can also just put in if you know the town that you're going to, somewhere you're traveling, you can just put it in if you need that kind of instant reading of the air quality index or AQI. And so it's very usable, and it's a great way to keep up when you're traveling.
And of course, we got to put in, Mandy mentioned it as well, but Updraft, we've got lots of pictures. I was posting nighttime fire spots that are just this incredibly bright white, and you can see the size compared to something like a Fargo Moorhead or even a St. Paul, because we throw out these numbers like 13,400 acres, and it's like, what does that mean in the context of the footprint of a city? One other thing, if you're really into weather, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I love the high resolution rapid refresh smoke forecast. It's publicly available, and it'll tell you generally where the smoke is going next.
Right. How far out does it go? Like 2 days?
It depends on the hour that the map is run
Okay.
on, but we've been showing loops on Updraft that go out, 36 hours.
Okay.
Most smoke models only go out to 72 hours.
Right. And even that I can imagine is a little difficult.
Mm-hmm.
This is like
Yeah.
a whole new. Sven, I was going to ask that question to you. You're like, how challenging is it to forecast smoke compared to like rain or snow, things that we're used to looking at on our radar?
Yeah, so people already know how difficult weather forecasts are and that we're, less than 100% accurate sometimes. And so now you take weather, which is what is pushing that smoke around, and you're trying to forecast the behavior of fires. So, for example, on those fires, they got a lot of rain actually this morning. So, how does that impact the
Mm.
smoke later in the day? There was also a lot of lightning. Could that spark more fires? So, we're trying to take instantaneous smoke plumes and forecast them out into the future. But that smoke is also going to be changing. So, that's why you really can't rely on it past 36 hours anyway. But it is very difficult to forecast where that smoke will go. But we do have a generally good idea. We knew this smoke would make it to the Northeast, for example, because we knew what the upper level winds are doing. And I just wanted to mention that our smoke from Canada and northern Minnesota right now has made it all the way to Greenland, getting wrapped around into storm systems. So folks and polar bears in Greenland are looking up at the sky wondering, wow, where did this come from?
Wow.
It's from Minnesota.
Yeah,
That's
well,
amazing.
Kelly, I want to add on to that real quick that this interesting fact from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency when I was talking about them, what they rely on isn't available in real time. So when they're forecasting, they use satellites to detect the heat of the active wildfires. And then they use that information to plug into the smoke models. But those observations, they said, can take several hours to produce. So when a fire grows rapidly or the behavior of it changes, those models are working with completely outdated information. So it's taking the initial conditions that they had. And so that's why smoke forecasting is very difficult.
Right. We just haven't caught up. And I think that's one of the things that I want to make sure that we're highlighting here is that I think in Minnesota, we are used to thinking about extreme weather events like a big thunderstorm, a tornado, a blizzard. Those we pay a lot of attention to, we're used to. And now we're adding on like a whole new thing. It's like a new category of extreme weather that has come to Minnesota, fires, and then the smoke impact of that. And actually, we have somebody here who has a question kind of about that. And I think, Jeff, we're going to be pulling you into the conversation. We have Rains from Golden Valley.
Hi.
Hey, good morning.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling in.
Thanks. I myself am an aspiring climate researcher, and I'm kind of wondering, we hear a lot about how the climate and climate change affects wildfires, but I wanted to pose the question of the inverse and how all of these frequent wildfires are affecting our climate and whether or not there's some sort of kind of feedback loop, kind of akin to what we think of with permafrost thaw.
Okay. So, Jeff, I'm going to steer that one to you.
When you get small particles in the atmosphere, it reflects away sunlight and helps cool the surface. And a lot of the weather forecasts that have been put out the last couple of days have been missing their high temperature forecasts because the smoke has been reflecting away enough sunlight to cool things down by a few degrees. So yes, you put a lot of particles in the air, it will cool down the planet. Whether that's significant on a global scale or not, I don't think it's much of an impact. But certainly globally, since we started burning so many fossil fuels, starting in the 1960s and 1970s, it did depress global temperatures some and global sea surface temperatures as well. We think a reason that the Atlantic hurricane activity was relatively quiet in the 70s and 80s was because of so much particle pollution out over the Atlantic Ocean, keeping the waters cool.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm also going to bring in here Jeanette from Albany, Minnesota. Hi, Jeanette. Thanks for
Hi.
calling.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So it sounds
would like
oh, go
to-
ahead.
Okay, two things. First of all, I often yesterday I was listening, and often people were recommending N95 masks, and my daughter fitted me one with one time, and I tore it off and gasped for breath because I can't wear one. My lungs have been damaged by radiation. But secondly, and this is more important, it's the issue that you were starting to talk about. I'd like to hear a discussion by meteorologists about how climate change is impacting these extremes. We really need to hear that more often.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. I think, Jeff, I'm going to give that back to you, and then we're going to come back here and talk with our meteorologist. But because climate change and extreme weather is right in your wheelhouse, how would you answer Jeanette's question?
Sure, if you've got a hot climate, you're going to have more extreme wildfire behavior. And the main reason that that happens is because heat will dry out vegetation, make it more susceptible to fires. And when that vegetation burns, it's going to burn hotter, it's going to spread faster. And that's the main effect that we think climate change has on wildfires.
Okay. Is there any way that we can know, like, how do we track this, Ben? Like, is there a fingerprint of climate change that we can say this has made this more likely, hotter burning? What can we actually say?
Sure. There have been numerous studies done over the last 5 years connecting the dots on all these things I just mentioned, the intensity of wildfires, their rate of spread, their size. All these things have been increasing because of climate change.
Okay. All right. So that's easily able to be measured. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Sven.
Oh, I just want to mention, Kelly. Yeah. So, for example, when these fires really took off Monday in the Boundary Waters area in Quetico, Climate Central has a climate shift index. It's one of these rapid attribution analyses, and they showed that those temperatures, 100-degree temperatures in the Boundary Waters, never seen before, or never recorded before, were made 4 times more likely due to the warming we've seen in our temperatures. So those are the impacts that we know. With a fire, obviously lightning or a campfire starts that individual fire, but the conditions really are ramped up when we have those unusually hot, windy, dry days that just all of a sudden happened. It was a cool start to the summer for northern Minnesota and central Canada above us, where most of our smoke comes from, and then all of a sudden caught up thanks to this heat dome just rapidly drying out and heating up those conditions, of course, combined with the fact that we have a lot of debris up there ready to be burned from the spruce budworm and other conditions. But that heat really makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about the smoke because that's so unusual. But Ben, I do want to just kind of make sure folks know the latest on the actual fires on the ground, like how many acres have burned. Do we know what kind of progress has been made toward containing them? Those sorts of things. Can you give us some of those statistics?
Absolutely. So you may hear different numbers as far as active fires, and you may see different acreage. Fires are moving back and forth across the international boundary with Canada, and so that's one reason. Also, we had the Wolf Pack and the Sioux Fire merge. Right now, I'm seeing about 10,800 acres on the merged fire. The Thumb is 15,300 something. The Bear Trap went up to almost 35,000.
Yeah.
The Camp's the one that's impacting folks the most. That's the one that's northeast of Ely, and thankfully hasn't moved that much closer to Ely. I got to tell you, on Sunday, that was basically delisted from some of the apps. They thought they had it under such containment. Then early Monday, it went to 40 acres, and then it exploded to 1,600 acres in just a matter of hours. That tells you how dry the fuels were and how the winds weren't even that strong.
That's what I was getting ready to ask. Is that indicative of high winds? You're saying no.
I mean, they were 20-mile-per-hour gusts, but we were getting this crowning behavior and this spotting. So where the fire was able to get to the top of the tree where the canopy is, and then you would get these convective columns that went up, and then it's kind of just flinging embers way out ahead of it, which also makes things a lot more dangerous for the fire crews themselves because they don't want to get trapped behind the lines. To Sven's point about the pests, that is another thing that we're seeing with climate. Here at the 45th parallel north and at the 45th parallel south, these invasive and hardy pests are able to thrive more getting into colder climates. And I was actually in New Zealand studying wildfires in December, and they have a cowrie dieback disease that's tied in, and that's also making fires more likely there. And we're seeing similar things across similar latitudes where these pests are also killing trees or making things dry. In addition, in 1999, there was a horrible derecho in the Boundary Waters, so 27 years ago, and there's still millions of dead trees on the ground from there. And so those dead trees were acting as fuel 27 years later this week.
Wow. It's a multi-layered thing, right? That's what makes it a little bit hard. I do have one call here, and this is a good question for you, I think, Ben. Peg, you're in Ely.
Hi, Peg.
Hi there.
Hi, go ahead with your question.
I'm about 15 miles out of Ely towards the west, and so I certainly get to see and smell the smoke. What confuses me is the numbers they use, because on the local Minnesota broadcast, it was talking about counts here of 900, 1,200. I alerted my son, who's traveling up from Michigan today. He went out to Weather Channels, and I did the same one out to and it's showing counts of 300 or 400. Are they two different scales? Because this is definitely confusing.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
It is. So we have the Nowcast AQI, which is the air quality index, which if you go to the Air Now website or the app, that'll be the first number you see. But if you click on the circle, for example, in the Hibbing area, in Virginia, the concentration is a different number. But if you just look at the color coding scale, that's probably the simplest thing to do. And people make the joke like, oh, meteorologists, you can just look outside. But if you do look outside and it looks at all, you definitely want to do something to that, to take action. We had that caller also mentioned that she can't wear masks. Yeah. We have a tutorial on something that's not as intrusive, and you can build at home for under $40 with some pretty inexpensive filters, duct tape, and a box fan that can help out as well.
It's a MacGyvered filter.
It is.
And I think it's pretty cool. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It is for your house, so it's not going to help you when you go outside. Yeah. But at the same time, it is something that you can do if you feel like you're getting too much in your house. Maybe you don't have, AC, something like that. So even putting it in one room, or the room that you're going to be in, or moving it around your house is going to help with your ear.
Yeah, because how many people in Grand Marais or Ely have air conditioning?
Very few.
Yeah.
They don't get the heat that frequently, so you have to find some way to filter out that smoke, whereas in southern Minnesota, most of us do have AC, and that does work pretty effectively.
Right, and bless their hearts. This week, they've been dealing with the heat at the beginning, and then once they could finally open up their windows, it was all smoke.
Yeah, Monday was effective. I mean, it's hard to say with absolute 100% certainty, but Monday was very likely to be the hottest day on record across the Boundary Waters. There were at least 9 different readings of 100 plus. We haven't really seen anything like that since 1936. Yeah. And then the previous record at Grand Portage, which is right on Superior, was 95 from many, many years ago. And they were already at 100 on Monday by 1 p.m. And so that was also not only tough on the firefighters and the people living there, but helped the fires to move really fast.
Right. Okay, so Mandy, I remember, we've had smoke the last few summers, maybe not as bad, depending on. So Canadian wildfires lots of times were what triggered air quality alerts in our state before. So how busy were we with air quality? Can you give us a little context? Right now this is very dramatic, and it's a big deal. It's happening right now, but give us where we've been and how we can, what it looks like where we're going forward.
Yeah, a lot of us remember last year being super smoky. I was talking to Sven about this. I feel like we were writing it in updraft almost every other day. Last year, they had 19 air quality alerts over 40 days. And 2023 was also a very busy year as well. They had 22 air quality alerts over 53 days. And when you take into account the air quality alerts just for wildfire smoke, 17 of those days last year were just for wildfire smoke, and then 16 back in 2023. So we've only just started this week. So I think we're on maybe the second or third alert that we've had. So it like Sven said, it's been a slower start to our wildfire season. So between 2025 and 2023, it was much greater.
So I think the $1 million question is this our new normal?
As far as it being our new normal, I think the point I like to get across to people is, yes, wildfires are very destructive, but they're also a natural and very important part of our ecosystem. Fire clears out dead vegetation. It returns nutrients to the soil. It helps some plants reproduce, and it creates space for new growth. And there's even some trees in northern Minnesota that have cones or seeds that are trapped in a resin, and they won't get released until there's a high heat from a wildfire. So obviously our goal is not to eliminate wildfires altogether, but it's to reduce the risk of the catastrophic fires, but also allowing fire to kind of play its natural role, Kelly, where it can be managed safely.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is a good chance to take a quick news break. But before we do that, I just want to remind people that obviously we have a crack team of meteorologists here in the studio and online with us to take your questions. We're talking today about this wildfire that has just impacted everybody in Minnesota, some more than others, but the smoke that is traveling around the state, it is unprecedented. So we're here to talk about it. You can give us a phone call at 1-800-227-6000 or 800-242-2828. We are going to check in with Phineas Pope real quick to get the latest news. Hi, Phineas.
Hi, good morning. The U.S. has expanded its airstrike campaign against Iran by hitting more bridges and collapsing a tower at a key Iranian port. The latest strikes early today are part of President Trump's threats to start striking infrastructure to pressure Iran to ease its chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran also launched new missile attacks against U.S. allied nations in the Middle East. The interim ceasefire agreed to last month has collapsed. The region has endured days of back-and-forth attacks. And Russian attacks overnight on Ukraine killed at least 4 civilians and wounded 20. That's according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia continues strategic bombing of Ukrainian civilian areas. Ukrainian drone attacks have also resulted in casualties in Russian-occupied regions. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has been rapidly expanding its workforce, hiring thousands of new officers. The expansion is part of the Trump administration's effort to increase immigration arrests and deportations. Concerns have been raised about the agency's hiring practices and whether new officers have been properly vetted. ICE claims most new hires are police and military veterans, but some applicants with questionable histories may not have been fully vetted. Andy Burnham has been officially declared leader of Britain's governing Labour Party, clearing his final hurdle to taking office as Prime Minister next week. The centre-left party announced the result of a leadership contest to replace departing Prime Minister Keir Starmer, in which Burnham was the only contender. He secured nominations from 379 of the 403 Labour lawmakers in the House of Commons. He will become Prime Minister on Monday. Federal health officials have identified lettuce from Mexico served by Taco Bell locations across 5 U.S. states as a source of the widespread outbreak of diarrhea-causing parasite Cyclospora. The CDC yesterday confirmed the source and warned consumers not to eat shredded iceberg lettuce from Taco Bell restaurants in Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia. Federal officials say Taco Bell has committed to stop using the lettuce amid the outbreak. More headlines coming up at 10 o'clock. This is NPR News.
The Strait of Hormuz is open, then closed, then open. As the U.S. expands strikes on Iran, Vice President Vance says Israel is thwarting peace talks. What happens now? Plus, a new EU plan to help Gaza recover, and Argentina and Spain are set for the World Cup final. The International Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
That's 1A next at 10 a.m. here on NPR News. We have a full afternoon here. After 1A, you're going to hear Big Books and Bold Ideas with Carrie Miller. If you want a little escape, she's starting a road trip series this week with one of my personal favorite books of the last year, The Road to Tender Hearts. At noon, you'll hear Left, Right, and Center. And then at 1 p.m., speaking of the fires, we will have special live coverage with an update on the Superior National Forest wildfire situation with a bunch of experts up there. NPR News host Nina Moyni will be here for that.
Programming is supported by the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community, a tribal nation that is the largest employer in Scott County and one of the largest charitable givers in Minnesota. More at shakopeedakota.org.
Programming on Minnesota Public Radio is supported by the University of Minnesota, using artificial intelligence to detect cancer early. Search Minnesota's healthcare leader.
Now back to our conversation about how weather and climate are shaping wildfire risk. A reminder, my guests today include Ben Cathy, the chief meteorologist for NPR News, Sven Sungard, a meteorologist for NPR News, Mandy Thalhuber, a meteorologist for NPR News. We have them all here gathered. And Jeff Masters, a meteorologist who writes about extreme weather and climate science for Yale Climate Connections. I'm going to go straight to the phone lines here. We have Samuel from St. Paul. Hi, Samuel.
Hey, how's it going?
It's
this is
going
Sam.
Okay.
I was just wondering, would you guys be able to describe the exact weather pattern that led to this 300-mile wall of fire that's extending from the Boundary Waters up into Ontario? I'm just wondering what exactly went on. Was it flash droughts, a line of storms, something of both?
Okay.
Sure. Thank you for calling in, Samuel. Sven had done some great digging on just how dry places like Ely and the Boundary Waters were compared to recent. But we did see on, I believe, the 9th, a line of thunderstorms come through. And actually, Angela Davis was talking to me like last Tuesday or something. The date's going to be a little off. But Angela was like, hey, I've got somebody going up to the Boundary Waters. Excuse me, the smoke's getting me. And I see there's like 5 1-acre fires. Is he going to be okay? And I said, yeah. And all the way through Monday, early morning, it was. And then there was this explosive growth because of the flash drought. But these are all triggered by lightning. And so to what Mandy was saying, fires are natural and we're going to see more of them. A little farther north into Ontario, there were these pyrocumulus clouds just a few days ago.
And explain that. So
if we break it down, pyro, fire, cumulus, the clouds above them, and they could be seen from space and by planes traveling nearby. The clouds form directly above the really intense heat and cause that really big convective cycle. And then those ended up moving downstream, if you will, and then producing lightning to the southeast. There's a really interesting blog out of the University of Wisconsin from this group called CIMS, which is CIMSS, and they talk about how lightning was forming downstream of these plumes.
Wow, that is fascinating. And I have to imagine that this is also typical in like Western fires. You know, the West has been long time dealing with wildfires, with drought, much more extended, long drought, dry conditions. So that same sort of cycle of a storm being big enough, or a fire, I'm sorry, being big enough to almost make its own weather that then helps it to continue to grow.
And in the West, too, we are really concerned after wildfires have been extinguished for years to come for these burn scars where the root system of trees is burned out. And so if you get these big rains or even lighter rains on topography, that could cause pretty immediate flash flooding, even landslides. Not as much topography there, but there is still an after effect when big rains do come in for years to come in many places.
Right. Hey, Samuel, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, I just have to ask because I have a note here that you work for the Friends of the Boundary Waters, or maybe volunteer?
No, I'm their head ecologist. So I was just curious about what was going on there.
Okay, I'm just thinking about a personal note from you. These fires are obviously impacting a place that you care deeply about. You have many, I'm guessing, friends who either travel there or maybe even live in that area. What are you hearing from them about, kind of the impact?
Yeah, I might have a little bit of a different take. For me, fire is a very important part of the Boundary Waters ecosystem and needed for natural regeneration. What's weird is that it's happening in the summer and that it's all happening at once. I think what I'm most concerned about is the people that are up there and all of these smoke impacts. I think the ecosystem itself is going to be A-okay.
Right. And actually, on Wednesday, on this show, we had a forest ecologist, one of the best in the world, Lee Freilich from the University of Minnesota, and he said those same things. The fires have long been a part of the Boundary Waters. In Minnesota, we have a history of fires, some more damaging, to people than others, but that this is a part of our system.
And I was talking in the winter because wildfires are a weather and climate passion of mine. There's a fire historian. He was originally using tree rings, the dendrochronology, and he was kind of comparing what different trees in different parts of the country were saying. And there are pre-Columbus records and after Columbus records of fires beginning in the Boundary Waters and slowly migrating south all the way to the Gulf Coast. The fire return rate, which means natural wildfires started by lightning, as opposed to human-caused fire that spreads, those are a little less than other parts of the country, say the East Coast. But these gradual fires were a little less toxic because they were happening more regularly. But now we're seeing the fires become really intense because there's so much fuel left. They just spark this inferno.
Right. Actually, Jeff Masters, I wanted to ask you that question because on a national level, when we talk about fire suppression and fire management, it's a big deal. What have you written about, or what do you hear about when it comes to kind of how federally this is managed?
We need to put more good fire on the landscape. There was a recent study published showing that when you do controlled burns, you actually reduce the intensity and the damage caused by fires, and it's like a factor of 2 or 3 bang for your buck to go and do these. We need to do them more often. But the trouble is we've got so much development now, so many people moving into what's called the wildland urban interface, or WUI. A lot of people are living in the forest because you want to have a nice natural look. And that makes it very hard to put these natural or these, prescribed fires out there because you don't want to burn down people's houses. And it's always this big push and pull between, we need to do more of this. And we're putting people's homes in danger because we have seen a couple of these fires go out of control.
I've actually, that's one of the things that I've had people ask me, like as we look forward 10, 20 years, is the answer that we just need to get more people out of some of these areas because it's hard to protect people, and we know that these fires need to happen. I mean, I'm thinking especially, Jeff, what you hear, because this is a local issue, but it's also very much a national issue, and it's something that isn't just Minnesota specific. It's talked about in Nevada, it's talked about in California, it's talked about in Washington.
We absolutely have to get more people out of the wildland urban interface because you can't even insure a home there. In California, for instance, good luck trying to buy fire insurance now for your home. So many homes have burned down in these threatened areas that they're just moving out. And it's going to cause severe impacts to the economy if we can't have a real estate industry that is insurable. So we have no choice but to get more people out of this, or we're just going to see collapses of the local housing market.
Right. I mean, and how insurance is dealing with climate change is like it's a whole show because it is really big. I do want to go back to something that Samuel said and just make sure that people understand, because I'm not sure if I did. Sven, tell us, he said it's weird that it's happening in the summer, that these wildfires are happening in the summer. Explain why that's weird.
Well, when you had Lee Freilich on Wednesday, he talked about that, like for the Boundary Waters, for example, typically peak fire season there is May before the green up when things are still pretty dry. Just like southern Minnesota, we typically look at April for our red flag days before things green up. And then Canada, obviously it's later, more into June before things green up there. So, we're seeing shifts in the fire season. Fire season's getting longer in the west and the north, and we concentrate specifically on Canada because the best way to get those air quality issues is surface smoke, and that's going to come from cold fronts for us. And where do our cold fronts come from? Southern Canada, whereas smoke from the west doesn't affect us so much because the Rockies act like a big mile-high wall. So we get elevated smoke. We'll get hazy days from western fires, but our smoke really comes from Canada. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the perspective about how bizarre this season was. Canada, their acreage or area of burned areas was about a quarter of normal, the 10-year average, up until the end of June, and then exploded to now above normal. So they basically quadrupled just in the last 2 weeks the area burned in fires in Canada, much of that being driven here by what we're seeing in Ontario and Manitoba just over the last couple of weeks, all because things just really heated up. It was already dry. Ben mentioned that, talked about how much drier it's been. We've been kind of in a bubble here in the Twin Cities with frequent rains up until this heat wave. Ely saw less than 2 inches of rain since June 1st up until the rainfall they saw this morning, which in some places accounts for about a fifth of their summer rainfall so far, just the rain they had this morning. So it's been much drier up to the north.
Yeah, in fact, I remember hearing in one press conference, they said, it's very odd. If you look outside, you're going to see brown dead grass in Ely.
Yep.
And this is, so just all of the microclimates in Minnesota. Let's go to Will in Scandia. Will, I think you have an interesting question here.
Yes. My question has to do with logging in these wilderness areas after major blowdowns or storms that knock down a lot of trees, and getting in there and clearing out that vegetation to prevent these large fires.
Okay, that's a really good question. Ben, I know that you, maybe with your study of fire, what do you think?
Yeah, with the Bemidji blowdown last year alone, we had a ton of concern. We are blessed to have this native news team at Minnesota Public Radio, and I was talking with Leah Lim and Chandra and Melissa There are millions of trees down around Cass County and Bemidji and Cass Lake, and there is quite a bit of concern well before these fires that this would be an issue. But we have this checkerboard land pattern up there. So you'll have some tribal land, some private land, some state land, some federal land. And from my understanding, it has made access to salvage log, hopefully that's the correct term, to go in and take these out. It's made it a little more challenging for access, and a lot of these places are really remote, but that could be certainly a really good thing. 'Cause as I mentioned earlier, from the Boundary Waters derecho from 99, there were still millions of trees, and I'm sure some of them acted as fuel 27 years later. How does it work on a business perspective? I'm maybe not the right person to ask, but I know there are some challenges that our native news team is addressing.
Right.
Well, and people who've been in Minnesota since that time know that that was a debate, in the late 90s. Should we go in and try to harvest some of these trees? But trying to get into the middle of the Boundary Waters with those big logging trucks is not something that's easy to do. And it probably did contribute to some of these. The last big fires we had in the Boundary Waters prior to this was a result of the blowdown in that 2006-2007 period.
Right. And kind of to that point, let's take a call here from Matt in Minneapolis. Matt, what did you want to say?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to respond to 2 points. One, there was a comment made just before the last commercial break that the fires are unprecedented, and that's really not true. 2 days ago, I think you had Professor Lee Freilich on from the University of Minnesota, forest ecology, and his comments were absolutely correct. This is normal. Fires are normal in this landscape, and in fact necessary. And so that's the first point. And the second point to the issue of wilderness, and you can't do commercial manipulation of forest in the wilderness area. But after the big blowdown, the Forest Service did propose and carried out a number of prescribed fires that were intended to reduce the fuel loads in the wilderness along the roads that enter, basically allow access into the wilderness, like the Fernberg Road and the Gunflint Trail and the Echo Trail. And that's the way the Forest Service reduced fire risk after the big blowdown in the wilderness.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Hey, Mandy, I'm going to kind of look to you because I think that Matt's point is really well taken.
Yeah.
We're saying, hey, this is a really big deal. And it is because we have a lot of people living here now experiencing this. But like in the broader context, like you were saying earlier, this is normal, necessary, and good.
It is, absolutely. And everybody just thinks of wildfires as being a scary, horrible thing. But I love that we have people like Matt who are saying, like, no, we need to remember that this is the way it was. This is completely natural for our ecosystem. Wildfire is absolutely essential for us to have. And I want to talk about it's still active, but it's a prescribed burn that is supposed to happen for Minnesota Point, just outside of Duluth. And they were actually going to do this prescribed burn in the springtime. But I learned, again, it's a wonderful story our native news team here at NPR is trying to do. I have learned so much. There's this guy called the Burn Boss. I apologize, I don't remember his name, but I have learned so much about what goes into these prescribed burns, how much resources it takes, and collaboration. And the reason it didn't happen this spring and they're delaying it to the fall was because we did not have ideal weather conditions. So again, it boils down to what's the weather pattern? Well, we kept getting those northeasterly winds off the lake. Well, they can't do a prescribed burn in Minnesota Point and have the smoke blowing back
into the city.
Yeah, they wanted to blow into Lake Superior. So I think a lot goes into these prescribed burns more than the public knows, and I'm very excited to do more with this story coming in the fall and learn and teach people, the public, how much work goes into these prescribed burns.
Yeah. And I do want to bring up this point because I know that we have gotten several phone calls over the last few days with people saying, because this is summer in Minnesota, and this is when people travel often to northern Minnesota because they want to go to the lake, they want to go to the lake, the Great Lake, Lake Superior, and they're nervous right now. They say, should I cancel my trip? Like, what do I do? So, like, Sven, maybe, and Ben, like, what would you say to people who are like, I have a trip planned to Grand Marais in 2 weeks. Should I cancel?
I think you just got to kind of stay in tune with the conditions. With that area is in moderate drought, and I know Ben's been looking at some of the 90-day outlooks call for below normal precipitation for that area. So they got some hopeful rain this morning, but the long range outlook for that area does not look good. And you've got fires burning throughout Canada as well. Our Minnesota fires are a tiny fraction of what's
Right.
going on actually.
In the
So
Quetico and further north.
unfortunately, yeah, and unfortunately, and I know people have heard from some of the Weather Service meteorologists that said this stuff might be going until the snow flies, and that could very well be the case. But yeah, we got to kind of take it day by day, week by week.
And Cook County, I'll just say the tourism board, that might something to that effect, was putting out on social media yesterday, like, hey, are you seeing these fires? A lot of Cook County is still open for business, and they're saying, we have a lot of amazing things up here. We have really nice art. We have other cool things. When it was so hot as well, on Monday, it was over 100. We had this upwelling event in Lake Superior, which made it 20 degrees cooler in some places near shore. Some of the buoys had a huge cool down. So if you go from the heat...
Hey, wait, stop. What? Explain more about what happened there.
Yeah, so we talk about El Nino and La Nina all the time. That's this upwelling. That's where these currents deep bring water up.
Okay.
And
that's in the ocean. So you're saying, but of course, Lake Superior is it's an inland sea. It is big. So the same thing is happening in the lake?
Yeah. So some of the buoys reported a 20-degree drop in water temperature in just a matter of hours.
Because colder water is getting brought up from deeper
from
into...
deep, exactly.
And that's a normal situation on Lake Superior.
Absolutely.
I always told people when I worked in Duluth, everyone wants to swim on the 90-degree day. Well, to be 90 on the North Shore, you got to have a west wind, which means you get that upwelling. The water is pushed out. The water comes in from the depths. You want to go on the 75-degree day when you have a light east wind, because then that surface water that's being warmed in the sun is moving inland. And it can get up to 80 degrees, the water near shore, when you have that happening.
Yeah, and it can really change. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, so you could... for the folks that are saying we may not be able to go to the boundary waters, you can go to the shore and maybe stick your feet in the water and cool down a little bit, but it might be really chilly to actually go full bore into the water. But I've seen a ton of people watching the big ships come in Duluth. There's, lined up along the wharf there and, getting great photos. So there's still a lot to do, but you've definitely got to watch to see how things are changing dynamically in the boundary waters directly.
Right, especially if you're going to go there. I think just yesterday we were saying in many ways this is just like one more weather event. When you plan a vacation, you don't know if it's going to be cold, you don't know if it's going to storm. You just kind of have to hope for the best and watch the weather as it gets closer and adapt at that time. And I think that's probably the best advice for people if you're not... Boundary waters is a specific thing because it's closed right now. But if you're just planning to go north for a vacation, keep it and see what happens.
Yeah, and if you're going to your lake house, was that Sven or Dr. Masters? If you're going to your lake, the air quality has improved vastly across a lot of Minnesota. So just keep an eye on that.
Right. What were you going to say, Sven?
I just want to say, as much as we can, we want to support these areas that rely on tourism in both the summer and the winter, because those places have been suffering with our milder winters, and El Nino winter is coming. There's probably going to be a lot less skiing and winter activity. So for them to get nailed in the summer and the winter is really going to hurt a lot of those places up there. So if we can support them as much as we can, it's a really good thing.
Okay. I want to take one more phone call here. We have Luke in Minnetonka. Luke, are you still there?
I am, yes.
Okay. Thanks so much for holding. What's your question?
This is perhaps a little bit outside of the realm of expertise of your guests, but especially with Sven's comment just a second ago about trying to support the people that live up there and rely so much on tourism. How can we get our elected representatives, both state and local and federal, everywhere, to actually maybe take some more productive actions towards addressing the conditions that are fostering these fires? Instead of writing angry letters to Canada, can they do something more productive?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Jeff Masters in, Jeff, because you are somebody who writes about this on a big scale. What is being done, or what can people do? Is there legislation? Are there other things?
It's a tough call. It's a tough row to hoe, as they say. You would have thought that an event like this, it's another dead canary in our coal mine. And our coal mine now has so many dead canaries at the bottom. Political action is just a very difficult thing. And I think education is the primary thing. Talk more about this. Talk to your elected representatives. Bring up what's important to them. Right now, they're really not prioritizing climate change. And I tell you, climate change is going to come to bite us pretty hard. It's already a threat multiplier, causing a lot of impacts in the economy that we don't really see, that aren't being talked about. So learn more, talk about more, vote for candidates that support climate action. That's about all we can do.
Yeah.
And I want to give a plug for Yale as well, where Dr. Masters works. They have these amazing climate maps, and you can go all the way down to your county or the congressional district. And what I think is interesting is that Minnesota has a 63% of the population that is interested in knowing more about climate, but only 21% say they hear about it in the news media at least once a week. So I think conversations like this are really a bulwark to get things started. And you can go through and say, hey, what percentage think that this type of action should be had? Or it's really detailed, and that's another resource. It's free to the public. And also, Dr. Masters works on the Climate Connections, which I actually got the email just before we came on. So I appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for that plug. I have one more thing to add. The airnow.gov readings of PM 2.5, that tends to be up to a 12-hour average. So it's a little bit slow to respond when you've got rapidly changing conditions. I like purpleair.com to see more in a real-time sense what's going on.
And we talked about that yesterday, so that's a good plug too. Thank you so much. What a fantastic conversation. I want to thank our guests again, Ben Cathy, Sven Sungard, Mandy Thalhuber, meteorologist team here at NPR News. Jeff Masters, again, writes about extreme weather and climate science for Yale Climate Connections, and you can subscribe to that newsletter. This conversation was produced by Carrie Dwyer. I'm Kelly Gordon in for Angela Davis. Carrie Miller will be here Monday.